People are calling this one of the most unlikely comebacks in sports history. What do you attribute it to?
Yeah, I don't know. I had a lot of help.
But you've also had a lot of adversity. You've had issues with management, conflicts of interest.
Yeah, well, the boxing world looks shiny from the outside. It's filled with promises that most of them turn out to be lies. You can't rely on anyone.
So what would you say the biggest deception was? What was the biggest lie you were told?
It's not that simple.
Why not?
No, that's the biggest lie I was ever told. It's not that simple. And it's a lie they tell you over and over again.
What's not simple?
Any of it. All of it. It's how they get you to give up. They say it's not that simple, Vinny.
So what's the truth?
That it is. That if you just do the thing that they tell you you can't, then it's done. And you realize it is that simple. And that it always was.
Welcome to Starting Over Podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos. And this is a show where we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. It's been a rough last couple of days for me. I had a super high blood pressure event where I had to go to the hospital. I was like 190 over something. Yes, it was them kids at school that done pissed me off. So had to go to the hospital on that. Then one of the kids at school got me sick with a mild cold. So I'm here with a runny nose. So if my voice and my energy is not quite there, bear with me. Okay? All right. So this is show 9. Counting down before the final episode of Starting Over Podcast. And I decided that I wanted to put something in there, these final shows for Legacy State. Something that'll be evergreen. So if this seems like, man, this is very generic advice, then that's why. Okay. All right, today's show is how do you actually become a better player? And somebody will say, well, okay, how could that be evergreen? And here is where I'm realistically going into. There are core things that I know a majority of players just don't do. Or that they've been playing so long that there is a hodgepodge of rules, understanding, favorite mechanics, all these things that are jumbled together into their understanding of the game. Even so much that this information ends up hurting them and not helping them. A prime example for me is that I lost a Rock State tournament because I didn't ask my judge for clarification on how hypersonic speed worked. I thought that I lost it because I crit missed an attack. And that I should have been able to finish my movement. But because I didn't ask the judge for clarification, I lost a game that I clearly was dominating and winning. And also, to another degree, I lost that game for the appearance of not being a cheater. So that is another like limiting thing as well. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. The number one thing I would tell you is to do, and this is step one, is to go and look at your pack again. There are a lot of assumptions that people have on how powers work, what interacts with them, what actually is this power and what it's not. And because most people don't read their pack pretty frequently, they will miss on a ton of nuance that is there for them to exploit. And I find that a majority of folks, even though the language is simplified and there's big and little font and standard font and, head on top of your shoulders and then upside down font and other symbols and hieroglyphs and all this other funny stuff, that people just don't read their pack and decipher everything. There's a lot of times where people will, from my perspective, not fully understand simple, basic mechanics of their character, and they fall short. And they go from like potentially going from a game that they would have won on paper, but they lose in practice. Okay. So the number one thing I got to reiterate is pack. And I know, like, for myself, remembering, great size rules, and how that, impacts my characters. And remembering that it's not all great size rules. Sometimes it's pulse wave. And remembering that pulse wave sets a character to its printed values, whether it's increased or decreased. Read your pack. Okay? Because there's a lot of times there are things that just work. Okay? They just work with what you're trying to do. All right. Next up, I would tell you to read the rules books. Read the quick start guide and the comprehensive rules, and then the tournament rules, if we have those again. Okay. Why read the rules? The rules are probably some of the most dry things that you can read. But I found that in the rules is the basis of things just being broken. There are things that are in the rules as is that people will completely overlook because they don't know of subsection .d of a rule section. Okay? And because of that, it can lead to certain, complications. And I'm just going to give you a common example from when I'm recording this. All right. It used to be that certain game effects would carry over if you rotated out a character. So if you had alter ego and all these other like older game mechanics, okay? But once they decided, hey, the only things at this point in time that carry over is if the character did an action and action tokens, a lot of other little game effects just poof go away. So you can end up taking outwit, you have a character that swabs. They're outwitted and you lost, maybe a core defense power. or an offensive power or something, you just swap out of it, and then boom, that outwit doesn't carry over. Or you have a character, they have perplex, you need it for that attack, boom, you perplex up the attack, swap out into a different character that has another ability. Yeah, like, so going back, reading the rules becomes really big. And I'll say this, a lot of points of failures for players happens here. I've dealt with a lot of people that are sound with a lot of the other things I'm going to talk about, but they are not sound at this rules level, and they get got at a tournament. And then they get mad, and they get mad at the game, and they say the game's too complicated, and they say the game's not right, and this, that, and the other. They blame everybody but themselves for not reading the rules. Now, do you need to get that Judge Sensei level of rules reading to be, that Ash Ketchum, the best that ever was? No, you don't. But you do need to, go in, have a very base level of understanding of the core rules. Okay? Even when it comes to like time on rounds, like folks do not know what the minimum time on round is and why it's a big deal. For example, I think this was 2022 Worlds. I think 2022 Worlds where they cut a round of Swiss short. I think the round was 35 minutes. And there was huge pushback. And primarily, it matters because it states in your rules, at least the last time I read them on this topic, that your round's minimum is 45 minutes. So that causes problems when people think they have blank amount of time and your internal clock says you have this much time left. And you don't because the judge, janked you around. That sucks. So, let's go to our next. Let's go to our next thing. Okay, point number 3, erratas. I have learned over time, having. You have to watch the wind, because while it feels like talking to an elder god, where if you offer your sacrifice and send up your prayer, they might come back and curse you. You need to be on top of the wind, and you need to be looking at erratas pretty frequently. And the reason why I say this is I've been in tournaments where folks didn't know that their team got changed. They sure the heck didn't know their team got changed, or a core mechanic changed. Okay, here's a example for you listeners of something that did happen to me. Okay. So this is when the second World's Finest, because the original was a 2x2. I'm talking about the second World's Finest appeared, and it was a duo. And during this period of time, duo still had split and merge mechanics. If you want to be a heroclix historian, you can go and look that up. Pretty much split and merge is that you can merge two characters together for them, as long as they have the qualifying names, into this character, to this base character, or you can split them out into two different characters that have this name or qualifying, as long as the points equal up, or into one character. Okay. So during this period of time, a friend and I were getting ready for a tournament, And we were sitting here talking about World's Finest, and that we could split World's Finest into like a top dial like vampire Batman or something dumb like that, where the points were correct but the power level was insanely stupid. Okay. And we were plotting because, again, split. When you split, you have to split onto the click number. Okay. And that's the important thing. You have to split onto the click number. So you could split on click 1 and have like Vampire Batman on click 1. Okay. So we're getting super hyped. Like this team is about to roll events, right? And then the errata comes out on split and merge. Like the next day. I kid you not. The next day. And if not the next day, 2 days later. Okay, so how hot do you think we would have been if we weren't on top of erratas? We showed up to an event, 300-point World's Finest, be like, yo, let's go. All these characters that we're going to split and merge into. And all of a sudden, we can't do it. Okay? So, even if it's characters that you don't like or you don't know, you need to be looking up on the erratas. You need to be looking up on the rulings on these characters, because some of the times it's just going to give you insights into how the judging staff thinks, and that's worth more than you know, because there's been tons of time where rulings have been used as like sniper shots back at the judging staff because of, you know, consistencies or inconsistencies with other rulings. So you gotta be on top of these erratas. And this is why I again, in past videos have said, like, look, man, you gotta have your team. You gotta have your squad. If it's 3 people, you know, you gotta divvy out responsibilities. Okay, you just got to, and somebody has to be on top of the win to let everybody else know what's up. Okay, now, I think a lot of people by now are going to say, this is rudimentary, Dark Logos. This is so rudimentary. Why even talk about this? And I would say the majority of people that go to big tournaments, whether it's Worlds, Rocktober, Rock Championship, Gen Con, if they open that back up again, Origins, whatever. Too many people with Paradise and a Dream fail in these first 3 steps, and they become the fodder for the pro. They straight become the fodder for the pro. And I'm not saying that the pro never loses to somebody with a Paradise and a Dream, but more than likely the pro is navigating through people like this. And people who don't follow these first 3 categories that I talked about are the most saltiest, hurt folks on all of your message boards. They really are. Because their perceptions of reality and reality itself do not coincide at all. And functionally, they are either willingly or unknowingly belligerent to their own state. And this is very important, because I'm reminded that people do this for fun. Okay? And when your sense of fun comes in with you, you know, like, think you're understanding the game that you're playing. Like, at no point in time did I go to play poker and then all of a sudden someone pulls out some dice and say, we're going to play Parcheesi or something. I'm like, hold up, wait. I came to play poker. Why are we playing another game? Okay. So, follow these first 3 steps. You know your pack. know your rules, know your erratas, look at the win. This is going to get you to the realm in which I will call you contender status. You're not pro, but you're going to be able to beat people that more than likely on paper, when we look at the next things, you should not beat because you know these things. Okay, let's go to what I think most people think this is about, is team building. Okay, I'm going to tell you the I've in the past I've talked about, various core supports, various concepts, things that how I broke down, like outwit, perplex, prob, and support into negation, stat manipulation, dial manipulation, and odds manipulation. So, like, because if you're just looking at those base powers, they're not always there in that form where I could just be like, oh, it's support, it's perplex, it's outwit, boom, 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 boom. Because their variants can just be as, powerful. So you really want to be, mindful of those concepts. But back in the day when I started, and this is an old man logos thing, you needed to have perplex, prob, outwit, and you needed at least a minimum of one. And then you would also hear a lot of people say you would need support. But you definitely could never pass on prob. And because the way the game was when I first started playing in 2005, the dials were long enough and support was cheap enough that if your big dude got beaten down and the maps were big enough, you could run away and get healed, and your opponent would have to probably spend 2 turns chasing you and be pushed, have pushing damage, clear, and then try to resume while you're being healed up. Yeah, like, things were a lot more raw, back in the day. Okay, that was the fundamental synergy. And this leads to my next point, is synergy. That was the fundamental synergy when the game started. You're like, well, what about TK? Like, yeah, TK became a thing after you could, flyers couldn't carry flyers, or, like GL got nerfed slightly. Okay, so when we look at synergy, I want you to think about a couple of key things. I want you to think about synergy between characters, synergy between the characters or figures in the map, the synergy of items in the map, and synergy of the characters with the items. Okay. Now, I think a lot of folks will be like, well, like, this is again, is fundamental. But again, a lot of people, and especially this is one of the reasons why, going back to why I'm ending the show, is currently with the introduction of terrain, if it becomes a permanent figure or staple in the game, how we think about the game without it is stunted. If you can't think about literally objects through space, terrain through space, transition of terrain through space, and permanency and non-permanency of objects, and I know these things do matter because these are basic brain functions. We didn't have to think about that before. So the cognitive strain that is on a player is a lot higher, regardless of the fact of WizKids trying to make the rules, quote unquote, simpler. The amount of cognitive work a player has to be aware of is a lot higher. So let's start breaking some things down. So when we are looking at characters, for example, you have a character that is your mega offense man, and then you have super deploy man with them. Okay, all right. You need both. Super deploy man is not going to win the game by himself. He has no damage, and super offense man can't get to where he needs to be to utilize his offense. Okay, both figures have something that the other needs. The next layer of that is a little bit more complex, which is I have a effect. The second figure has B effect. The two of effects gives us C effects. Okay? So again, basic algebra, A plus B equals C. Okay. Now, no, A by itself is still A. B by itself is still B. A and B together gives you C. A lot of times, people are not thinking like this. A lot of times, people just see A and B and stop there. You need to look at A plus B equals C. Okay, so for example, I have a character that gets a bonus for going through and destroying blocking terrain. Okay, great. That happens. Okay, what happens if I'm on a map that doesn't have blocking terrain? Okay, then I need to have somebody with barrier. Okay, so I have a character that gets bonuses for going through barrier. Then I have through blocking terrain. Then I have B, I have a character who can generate blocking terrain on maps that don't have blocking terrain or inconvenient blocking terrain. That gives me C. The combination of the two actions gives me C. Okay. The main problem that comes in a situation like that is people will try to force C because they invested in A, they invested in B, and they're trying to force C. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to a concept that I saw with another player that I can't recall his name right now. And what he did is, and it's a Canadian, a lot of great innovations come from Canadians. So what he would do is he would say he had A plus B equals C. He had B plus D equals F. And then he had J plus K equals, let's just say T. And then he would also have A plus K equals E. Now you're like, what the heck? You just spouted a bunch of variables at me, and that's sort of the point. The gentleman in question functionally said, if I have this character and this character, I'm going to do this. If I have this character and this other character, I'm going to do something else. If I have the third character and the fourth character, they're going to do something. If I have first and fourth, they do something in So a lot of times when we're looking at synergy from a figure basis, most people stop at A plus B. Some people might get to B plus D. Okay. But when you're going through and you're like, these three figures together do this, these two figures together do this, I interchange these characters to do this, you start to realize a lot of times, and this is the important thing where I want you to learn from synergy, many times people give up too early because they only see A and B or A plus B equals C. Because if I take away your A or I take away your B, you don't see anything else. Okay? And that's a fundamental failure. Okay? Now you could say, Dark Logos, if I ran a one-man army, then there is none of this. And then fine. That's not necessarily high levels of synergy. If you're running a one-man army and some equipment or some other effects, you're still needing some level of synergy. If someone takes away your equipment or takes away your sideline effect or stops your movement, you are still layering in an A plus B. It's just a micro A plus B instead of a macro A plus B. Okay, the next thing is, how does all this work with the map? I've seen more teams die, rightfully so, because of map pool. Too many times people are blind to how good something is on paper without logistically, like, saying, ooh, I really need to win map. And if I lose map, I have no other options. Or even, sort of taking it a step further and, hey, there are maps in this map pool that just screw my team. And they're popular. Like, I've had so many different teams that have died. Like, I had OG first draft master mold with Infinity Gauntlet. And I was like, man, this team is killer. It's doing this and that. And then the rules at that time said if your character can't fit in the starting area, it's immediately KO'd. Well, there was a very popular map that was it was I hate saying standard because map standards change. It is a 2 square deep starting area. And they ruled that, hey, if you put a multi-base figure down, which it was, because that master mold, I think it's a 3x4 or 3x6 or something like that. If you play that master mold, it can automatically KO. They also had a rule at that period of time that you could not, colossals and giants did not have sight elevation +1. So there was another map called like Bizarro Town or something like that, where like you couldn't move, you couldn't place, you couldn't shoot. And it was popular enough where it killed a team. Now note, this master mold could have been a contender. It had a lot of things that were disrupting a lot of, teams at that time. But I had to keep in mind, this had an adverse synergy to the map. There are also, like, we get into map, there are figures that synergize with certain terrain really, really well. To the point where you can have them as their own thing, and you don't have to think about anything other than that map or that terrain type. But if you can't generate that terrain type or get your map, you're in trouble. The next thing that definitely when we're looking at maps is there is a point of utilizing a map that is not popular, because it will throw I would say the beginner people, the people that haven't followed the first 3 rules that I've gone through, and they skip down to 4, it throws them off because they're jumping straight into the popular meta, and the popular meta will tell you what maps are good. And if you play an off map, people won't be thinking. There's pros and cons to this. The pro is that your opponent is unsure. The con is they eat clock. And if that's not part of your strategy, then yeah, I hate to say it, that's something that you have to think about. So when we're taking that, looking at the figures, and we're taking our combination of figures and we're putting them on that map, what are they doing? Why are they doing what they're doing? What's their plan to get downfield? What's their plan of retreat? Retreat used to be a bigger thing before the map shrunk, but now where I don't look at retreat the way I used to look at retreat. I look at retreat what more people would call regroup. If you need to maneuver into a zone of the map to re-quantify your power, bring your opponent in, or make them spend more energy than they normally could, than they normally would have to, then that can also qualify with caveats. And I know someone says like, well, what are the caveats? And I'm like, they're exhaustive and you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. It also depends on the team. You know, I joke around with a friend of mine. I have a Miss Cleo hat, and I call things like 6 months to a year and a half before they happen in terms of a piece viability or things in the game. But I can't see everything, you know. While I might joke around and say, call me now, you know, at point of recording, my inherent psychic time-piercing powers have not manifested upon me to give me divine insights into all variables that is going to be in heroclix. All right. Lastly, we're talking about under synergy. We're going to be talking about terrain placement and object placement. Previously, you were just using objects for, hey man, I'm going to go here and hit with a super strength attack or a TK attack, or I'm going to have stealth. Now you need to be thinking more creatively. You need to ask yourself the following question. If I need, let's just say, 10 squares of barrier to start, and my team can only generate 8, and I need those 10 squares of barrier for my first turn to go off without a hitch, how would you solve that problem? And then I could say it's like, either I'm going to get a 2x1 piece of blocking, or I'm going to get a single 2x1 piece of blocking, or I'm going to get two 1x1 pieces of blocking, and those are going to be in my object pool. Okay. Now, that would guarantee with my 2 characters that I have with barrier that I'd be able to utilize my 10 squares, and my plan will always go off. I will have consistency. Okay? I'll have consistency. The next thing I can say is, hey, let's say I have a plan and I'm looking at the map, and my biggest issue is navigating elevation. Okay, well, I have elevated terrain markers set up so that I could go from elevation to elevation to elevation. I can make my own steps. Is there a part in a map that I know just ruins my team? Can I solve that with terrain? And then even more so is, can I solve that with terrain before my opponent destroys my terrain? How durable is my terrain? And if they destroy my terrain, what would my opponent have to commit to destroy my terrain? If it's like, hey, they have to commit 3 damage, well, in most cases, they can't just send the piddly dude that's just there for support to destroy the terrain. They have to send a 2nd tier attacker or a 3rd tier attacker. Okay, let's say it takes 4 more damage. Well, you're going to have to send a primary attacker to destroy my terrain. That matters. It controls tempo. Because if they're destroying my terrain, what are they not doing? Shooting my figure. Okay? So, looking at using the terrain as solutions of navigating your map. Also, think about, how could someone use terrain to do things on the map that I don't want them to do? I'm on elevation 2. Could they use a terrain to put up in a place to approach me? And this is supposed to be my sniper's nest. Okay? Could someone put down hindering terrain and it be aggressively placed? Oh, what happens when, does my opponent really want me to destroy this terrain? Because when it does, it gives them a forward placement of hindering to help their stealth team. See, these are little things that, I do not think currently in 2024 there are any masters of heroclix, because you don't see these as constant benchmarks of high level play. They're inconsistent. There are great players. I'm not going to crap on anybody's day. I mean, heck, like a majority, like if you look at pedigree, I mean, I'm not the worst, but I sure the heck am not the best. Okay. But when you look at how consistently people are utilizing terrain to get around different nuances of the map or create anomalies in the map that people didn't have to deal with before, it's lacking. So, like, take for example, you have an indoor map. You have a place that you can hold up, but you know that the common figure has improved targeting, destroys blocking. All right. Well, what could you do to hold up to prevent line of fire from the most common areas that they could shoot at? You could put a terrain down that's elevated, because when they shoot you, they would have to ignore elevation as well, which creates a problem. So that forces an intimate engage that they may not want, or at least for them to sacrifice somebody to either come in, pick up the object, or spend actions to destroy the object. And if that buys you the time you need to make your play, then you've won. So, again, synergy. I really want you to come back and use the algebra that I gave you when you're building teams. And I know I'm using it, and a lot of people is like, Dark Logos, I'm not math inclined. That's why I use variables and not concrete numbers. Okay? Is you should be able to quantify in your own brain. This plus this gives me this effect. I add this effect with this other effect. It gives me this new effect. Even if you have to be linear and you're going to say A plus B equals C. Look at what C looks like. C plus D gives me E. Look at what E does in comparison to C. Even if you have to linearly go through the alphabet, that's fine. And you will end up making far better teams than 99% of the people out there that are casual. Okay, so that's point 4. Let's move on to point 5. Placement. Ooh, I'm going to say this, and this is my view of the game right now, and not necessarily how it is in the future. But placement in a smaller map with current values is not as emphasized, and there's a lot of nuance that's gotten taken out of the game once the map got smaller. But once you engage with terrain, placement becomes superior. Once you engage with terrain, placement becomes superior. Here is why. A lot of people don't have a plan other than their first strike. And then from there, their whole goal is to just keep throwing dice until their opponent is dead. But placement becomes important because of a couple of key reasons. The first key reason that placement comes important, and I've talked about this in the past, is zone of influence. Zone of influence. How much can I put pressure on you not to be in a place because I can harm you with my team? Okay. The second thing that placement becomes really important is target selection. Okay. What can my opponent attack? What can my opponent hit with their effect? What can my opponent do to disrupt my team with their team once they start taking action and start focusing on specific characters? Okay. And then the last thing is you're triggering additional effects. Okay? You're triggering additional effects. And a key example of this is, okay, I move my character in this specific way because I'm able to drop smoke cloud as I move, and it's underneath these characters. Now they're -1 to attack on their turn, and they're tied up. Okay? So my placement becomes important because my character can move through other characters and drop smoke cloud, and now they're able to tie up these characters, forcing them to be in a penalty for a turn. Okay? That becomes really important. All right, so let's go through. So it's 3 points. So zone of influence. Okay. A lot of this comes into what people call swing or reach. So just to break it down, this is a more, I would say, this is a archaic, deep, old magic rule of the game that matters not as much right now. So what would happen is, because the game used to be a lot more alpha strike heavy, you would calculate swing. So swing would go like this. So TK, okay, plus move and attack, okay, plus range, okay, plus a modifier. Okay. It's a very simple formula. Okay. If you can't see this formula during a game, that's probably why you're losing. TK plus move and attack plus range plus modifier. And you're going to say, Dark Logos, my guy charges. He doesn't have range. So then that's a 0. Dark Logos, my guy doesn't have any modifier on his movement. So that is a 0. Like this is basic second grade math here. So TK's range, it's been as high as 10 and as low as it is now, it's 4. So let's just go with our current numbers as is. So let's just say I have a decent figure. I have a TK on my team, so that's 4. It has a movement value of 8 with running shot, so it's above average. So that's going to give me another 4. Okay, it has a range of 6, so that's going to give me a 6. I have a modifier, I have a perplex that I can use on its movement, so that's going to give me a 1. Okay, and I don't have any shield or anything like that. All right, so we count it up. So 4 plus 4 equals 8. 8 plus 6 equals 14, and 14 plus 1 equals 15. My swing is 15, so that's the amount of space that I can cover. Okay. Now, for a lot of people, they would be like, "Wow, that's a very big swing." Okay, depending on what type of map you're playing on. All right, knowing this, if I'm playing against this character and I know their swing is 15, I have every incentive. Okay. I have every incentive to stay out of that reach until I'm able to sort of step in and take my own shot. If I can't step in and take my own shot, I have to be aware that my team is going to take damage before the engage unless the dice are on my side. And that is very important. Betting for the dice to be on your side just because you're a good boy is dumb. I've been there. We all pray or have hope or good vibes only that the dice screw our opponent. Okay. That's not a strategy. That's well wishes. Okay. So knowing that, hey, Super Duper Man has a reach of 15, I need to stay here and force him to come in because my reach is 14. He has to come in. And if he refuses to come in, I'm going to slowly advance with these other mechanics in my team that I've built in. Okay, so when we're looking at zone of influence, okay, I bring up, hey, like, There is barrier to reduce or mitigate zone of influence. There is stealth, things that restrict movement in line of fire. Okay, any mechanic that does that goes into the zone of influence thing when it comes to our placement. Okay, next, because I can really like beat up zone of influence and make a whole video out of that, and I have in the past, and so you need to go and look at that. All right, target selection. I got to admit, I might not be the best at target selection, but I'm definitely like an old Muhammad Ali. Give me a chance. I will straight rope-a-dope you and disassemble your team. Okay. Why is that? Okay. Target selection. Things that you can't let live, even if your team has to bleed. If Scott Porter is given +1 attack to your opponent's entire team, and there's Scott Porter's given +1 to his defense, and your defenses are not that high, and your attacks are okay, you need to kill the one that's messing with defense first so you can land hits. Now I know people would say, hey, you need to deal with the one that's attacked because, attacking is a big chunk of the game. Here's the issue. If you can't hit due to defense shenanigans, why keep having to roll high? If your defenses aren't high, lowering your opponent's attack is not going to help you last longer in this encounter. Okay? Now I know some folks will say, it's like, but why would I ever go into an event with low attacks? People do it all the time. There's people out there who still think 11 attack is popping fresh. So, anyway, going back. You need to see what is hurting you the most first. Then you need to see what is obstructing my defense. Like, they have this character, I'm shape change super senses, and they have something that shuts all that off. That thing needs to die first. My entire defense is based around shape change super senses. Oh, they have a character that says I can't target you unless I'm within X range. Okay, well, I'm kamikaze super duper man, making an exchange that's in my opponent's favor so that I can have a late turn rally against my opponent. I have to run a gambit. Like, being aware of these things ahead of time allows for you to have a whole lot less stress going into a tournament. Knowing what sacrifice fodder, and again, going back to what you're going to send out there to die so you can achieve your greater goal, it becomes super important. Okay? Too many times, people will try to beat up the big tank guy, okay, and then completely ignore the support. Or people will dismantle the support and get beat up by the tank guy. And what I would tell you is, there are points and times where you need to hit the tank guy so he's doing less and kill support, or cripple the support so it can't do what it needs to do, and then slug through the big tank guy. All right, those become very important things. Yes, there are, attackers / support characters. I understand that those exist, and sometimes you're not dealing with pure support or pure attacker or pure control. I understand that. I understand that more than you know. But identifying what is it on your opponent's team that hinders you from doing what you need to do or causes the most threat to your team is the most important thing with target selection. Next thing with your placement, you need to trigger additional effects. If you're going through and you're like, yeah, I have stealth, but I keep ending, not on hindering terrain, that's a placement problem. For example, let's say you have stealth, you have super strength, you have charge, you have Batman TA. Okay, so you pick up a object, uses it in an object attack, boom, and then you just make sure that the hindering lands underneath your character. Now you have stealth. Your stealth is active. You have dolphin symbol. Now you're in the water to get your water effects. Okay, you're making your attacks in the water. There are a multitude of things that you can do to make sure that you're meeting secondary and I think it's like tertiary objectives, so that you get other micro bonuses. If you have something that says like, hey, I need to go through blocking terrain to trigger these effects, then do that. Okay, understand when your opponent sees that you have placement dependent mechanics, your punches are telegraphed really hard unless you as the player can get very creative. Now, do understand, telegraph punches do land. Like don't get it twisted. Telegraph punches do land more than you think. But your opponent, if they are capable, will be able to solve for that. Okay? Maybe not mitigate all of it, but definitely be able to solve for it. Alright. Alright. So let's wrap this up with my sixth and final point, tweaking. I'm gonna channel my mental clone of Lucas Van Hollen in my head and say practice. There is only so much head theory that you can do with a team. There really is, and I've been doing this for almost 20 years. Okay. The reason why I say this is you will come up with teams that in your head just make sense. They make pure logical sense. And then when you play them, you're like, why did I get curb stomped by hot garbage at locals? What happened? I went 0-3. Everybody came in and got their licks in on me that day. What happened? Where did I go wrong? Do I need to repent before the Lord and wear sackcloth and ashes type levels of butt whoopings? Okay, so the first thing that I come to is your head canon is by far the worst in almost every situation. Okay, I have sat back and made Starship Enterprise level teams while my opponents were understanding the basic laws of thermodynamics, okay, in terms of heroclix. And the main reason is I played my team before I played my team at locals. That's realistically it. I saw, oh, this is hot, let's go. And I got with the boys on Discord, and we were like, yeah, this is hot, do this. It's like, you got this? Nah, play this instead. That's hot, let's run it. Okay, boom. That one game puts me over most folks, and then I immediately just like, oh my gosh, I have a problem. Oh gosh, if I don't hit this first attack, I'm sort of screwed. Oh my gosh, if this one thing shows up, I am in a super popular, I'm in trouble. I need to scrap this team and play something else. Okay, there are times where I'm just like, it's Black History Month, let's go, dude, let's go. For the people. But that's like once a month. Once a year. Like, I'm not doing that every single week that I go. Alright. And so a lot of folks will say, but I don't got time like that. Well, congratulations, you hit your first ceiling. And that's fine. Because everything that I said up until this point, you functionally could do by yourself. but you really do need other people for tweaking your builds. Definitely, if you plan, if you're on a limited budget, and $300 team, $500 team, that's just too much. You're going to be tweaking, utilizing what you got. Okay. All right. Like I'm sitting here looking at a bunch of iconics that I have that I'll never play. And if somebody came back and told me, yo man, you got to use that Wolverine tonight, I would be tweaking and tweaking and tweaking that Iconics Wolverine so hard. Okay. I'd be like, all right, well, I can't carry him. Who else do I have that has some sort of effect that I could get him in place? Can I do this? Can I keyword check him? Can I use this other effect to move him for free or half his movement or all these things? All right. Once you've played something a couple of times, and by a couple of times, I realistically mean around 3 to 4 minimum, you're able to understand the ebbs and flows, how it works, what's important in the team, what's not. There's a lot of times when I've hit the tweaking stage, and this is why you have friends. You just have to admit something that you like doesn't work. Something that you like doesn't work. I have figures that I love. In theory, I love them playing around. I love them for what they do and because they encourage how I like to play and how I think. But when it comes time for a tournament and my teammates say, bruh, you're never going to play this figure because of this, and this scenario, and when you finally utilize this character in your team, you're on the back foot. Drop the figure, play C figure instead, and then you're going to be way more aggressive and more successful. It hurts. It hurts. And I'm not going to come through and be empathetic about this. I understand as a person, confession time. I put in so much work on Cosmic Panther, even while my teammates were saying, Green Arrow exists, one-armed Green Arrow exists, or Elseworlds Green Arrow exists, right? He just sort of one-shots him, right? And it hurts because I finally got this figure that I want. Finally got this figure to play sort of how I want to play. But I had to learn really quick. I couldn't always play him. And when I did finally play him, I had to accept his limitations. And there were some things that I just couldn't tweak out of those limitations. And that would put my team at a on paper ceiling. I had to then rely on other core elements, my synergy of my remainder figures, my placement, okay, knowing all my rulings that involved him, knowing the rulings of every figure that messed with him. Okay, playing practice games so that I just knew, I got to moonwalk back from this. Like, I am not wiping anybody with this team. I'm taking points, take my hits, and moonwalk back. Okay? And I ran full Cosmic Panther. So that just lets you know, like, what type of situation I was in. And that goes back to the tweaking process. At first, I was at low dial. Then we came to the conclusion, low dial doesn't work. And as much support as you would pack in, it won't compensate. So I was just like, screw it. Let's go full dial. Let's go full points. It's a different mindset. It's a different type of play. There's different things that I had access to that I didn't have access to. There's other options I had to cut out. Okay? So tweaking becomes core, especially if you're going to go to the big events. I think what ends up happening is the community gets lazy. They go to the podcasters to build their teams and utilize their research to build their teams for them. And then they're like, I'm just going there to have fun. Not knowing that they're just like what were those little feeder flakes to fish inside of a fish tank. That's all that you're doing. Okay? Tweaking, changing, not going by the formula, no matter how much people you respect tell you that this is the team to play. It's the best team, using all mathematics and objective reasoning and the signs cross and future sight and ultra instinct, all that. Okay? You got to come back and do your own work. I used to tell people, yeah, man, know all the figures, know what they do. You don't really need to do that once you're able to read people's cards. But once you start, I believe in place of knowing deep knowledge of figures, knowing how to tweak your team becomes the thing that stops you from being, that leaps you from being Joe Blow number 5 to, hey, I was able to make it into out rounds of Swiss. I really do. And again, that requires you to, practice. That requires you to, let go of your darlings. And more importantly, be willing to take feedback from the people that are around you, whether they're your teammates or your locals. I got great feedback from one of my locals that led to a team that I played at Worlds one year. My 2023 Worlds team, I ran Black Leopard. And my teammates were like, look, man, you've been wanting to run a Black Panther for Worlds for how long? This is a year that it's actually viable. Okay, you're bringing Black Panther onto X-Men through the Genesis APOP train. Okay, great. All right, how's that going to work? What are you doing? All right, you're bringing in Ant-Man too? Oh, hot diggity dog, let's go. Okay, and now I have something that I'm using that's mine. Was it most efficient? No, but good golly, Miss Molly, I performed better than I did most years at Worlds. Were there times where I was just at a disadvantage? Yes. And I had to swap those characters out that I normally would want. But I wouldn't have known that unless I practiced and I tweaked. Now, if some people said, hey, Dark Logos, how much are you practicing? And I would be like, depends. From some of my teammates, not enough. To the average person, they're going to be like, how are you dedicating that much time to practice? And I'm going to hit you with something that I told a guy at my local, shout out to Seth, years ago. And it allowed for him to grow as a player. He said, we were after a tournament, he said, I can never beat you. And I was like, yeah, you can. Just not with what you're playing. And he's like, I keep playing and playing. It doesn't matter how much I learn or what figures I get. I can't beat you. And I said, all right, how much time did you put in on your team? And he said, I built it before the event. And I said to him, how much time do you think I put in on my team? And he was like, I don't know. And I said, I've been working on my team since Tuesday. I've put in 10 hours on my team. So in the end, whose effort is going to win out? my 10 hours of effort or your few minutes of effort? And then he was like, I don't really have time for that, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, what else do you do that's fun? It's like I played Halo with my son when Halo was popping. And he came back. I said, it's like, look, man, if you took one of those days, you and your son, instead of playing Halo, y'all spent 2 hours talking and building heroclix, you're going to see your results change. And his results did change to the point, advancing into the final round of, was it a rock tournament or a WKO? I forgot. He beat me. And I helped him build his team. But that's the work I think a lot of people don't get. I think a lot of folks just say, like, Dark Logos, it'll always be 1,000 years too early for me to play you because you've been playing this game for 20 years almost. And I'm like, come back and be like, you were blind because you could not see Mount High. It's not that. It's I've had time to develop and create better methods. And I used my prime example of this, and then I'm going to wrap up the show. Every year, minus one that I coached, I have broken in team sealed. Every event that I've played, every Worlds or tournament that I've gone to, team sealed, multiple different teammates, multiple different skill levels. I, Edward Shelton, have broken every single time. That is not luck. That is skill. And it's based off of the methodology that I'm listing to you right now. I have core foundational understanding of the game so that I can utilize it no matter what type of team that I'm playing. I've played so many different types of teams that you could hand me an OMA and I can win. You can hand me a 3-man squad, I can win. You can hand me a 10-figure puppeteering squad, I can win. Okay? And so when all is said and done, when you apply better methods, you get better results. Is this the summation of my methods? No. But this will definitely put you ahead of 60 to 75% of the player base that you're going to deal with. It will allow for you to have some time to actually compete against a pro. I'm not saying win, but actually compete. And I'm going to give you the dark secret of the pro community. The dark secret of the pro community is someone that is off reservation. Someone that is not playing the standard meta, that hits the community sideways because they weren't planning for it. And the only way people in the community can create more dark horses is to up their fundamentals. We got a bunch of, I'm just going to say it as politely we have a bunch of steroided up players. We have a bunch of Attack of the Clone players. And those players actually fuel the power of the pro players. They just do. Because the pro players can be creative, put out the obvious. Play this figure, it's great. Play this other figure, it's just obviously good. I'll play this and this together, and I'll just play 5 of them, and blah, blah, blah. Play 8 of them. They're just good, play them. And then later on, they'll make tweaks, and they'll look at the placement, they'll look at the maps, they'll look at the rulings, and they're going to have something similar, but not exactly what they talked about. And then they're going to be like, Edward, come on, man. You know, that's just how it goes. But again, what is the average person going to do? They're going to go to wherever the team is posted or wherever the ideas are posted at, and they're going to clone. Because I don't have enough time, quote unquote. This is for fun, quote unquote. And then they expect to win like they put in their own effort. So who's going to win? Me, who put in 85 hours on my team from start to finish, or the guy that decided to copy Clickstall, Critical Clicks, insert new podcast shows here, meta-analysis team, without understanding what's going on. Now you could say, hey, on any given Saturday, you can lose a game of heroclix. And that's true. But who would you bet on? If I wasn't wearing the Phoenix Nest jersey, you didn't know who I was, and I gave you those stats. This man put in 5 hours on his team, copied it from a podcast. This other man put in 75 hours on his team, developed it from start to finish. Who would you bet on? It's easy. You would bet on the person that put in more time. So, all right, that's it for today's show. This is countdown. So 9. There are 8 more shows to go. I'm hoping that the next show is the Black History Month show. I'm going to have Kyrie Sampson back. He confirmed. I'm going to try to get Will Holland. And I have one other person that I want to try to get on the show for us to talk and record. Yeah. I'd like to thank you all for listening. And